something called hostile architecture.
Some see it as an attack on the most vulnerable.
Hostile architecture is everywhere, and you've sat on it before. The bench at the bus stop late at night, when your feet hurt and there's nowhere else to go. You tried to lean back and there was no back. You tried to stretch out and there was a steel armrest bolted right where your hips would be. So you shifted, you fidgeted, and eventually you gave up. And you probably thought the problem was you. It wasn't. That bench did exactly what it was built to do. Someone sat in a meeting, looked at a drawing, and decided that you should not be able to lie down. Not you specifically, but someone like you. Someone tired. Someone with nowhere to be. Someone the city would rather not see resting in public. This is coercive architecture. It's the layer of the built world that doesn't ask you to behave, it makes you, using concrete and steel and angles instead of rules and signs. There's no notice on that bench that says no sleeping. There doesn't need to be. The bench says it for them. Silently, every hour of every day, and it never clocks off. And once you learn to see it, you can't stop. The spikes in the doorway, the slope on the ledge, the armrest that exists for no arm. You start asking the one question this whole video is really about. If a city is built to keep certain people out, to move certain people along, to make certain people just uncomfortable enough to leave, then who exactly is it built for? It's probably not you. So let me show you why. Let's be precise about what you're dealing with, because the city is counting on you not having the words for it. Coercive architecture is design that controls your behavior without your consent, and usually without your knowledge. You may have heard the narrower term for its nastiest form, hostile architecture. The spikes, the studs, the deliberately broken comfort. But coercion is the bigger family, and most of it is gentle enough that you'd never think to complain. A bench that's just a little too short to lie on. A plaza with nowhere to sit at all. A smooth stone wall where a low ledge used to be. None of it shouts, and that's the entire point. Here's the part that should bother you. When the city wants to control you with a law, it has to write that law down, debate it, and defend it out in the open. You can vote against it, you can drag it into court, but when the city controls you with a building, none of that applies. There's no vote on the height of a ledge, no appeal against a slope. The decision gets made once, poured into concrete, and from then on it enforces itself, forever, on everyone, automatically, and almost nobody recognizes it as a decision at all. That's the trick. Architecture works exactly like a law, but it never gets treated like one. It looks functional. It looks innocent. It looks like the world simply happens to be shaped this way, and because it looks accidental, it's almost impossible to fight. So you move through a space that's quietly making thousands of choices about who belongs and who doesn't, and you experience it as just the way things are. It isn't. Every uncomfortable surface you've ever met was somebody's instruction, aimed at somebody. The only questions left are who gave the order, and who it was meant for. And that's where this gets dark. Once you have the eyes for it, walk through any city center and start counting. Start with the benches, because the bench is where coercive design built its masterpiece. Look for the armrests, not at the ends, where an arm might actually go, but in the middle, and then again a third of the way along. Those aren't for resting, they're dividers, set at exactly the spacing that makes lying down impossible. Then there's the bench that's been quietly vanishing altogether, the single curved metal perch, or the infamous Camden bench in London. Designed by Factory Furniture, a lump of concrete sculpted so cleverly you can't sleep on it, can't skate it, can't stash anything under it, and can barely sit on it in comfort either. It isn't really a bench, it's a refusal, shaped like furniture. Now look down. See the studs in that doorway? Back in 2014, a London apartment block bolted metal spikes into the ground outside its entrance. The same kind you'd use to keep pigeons off a ledge, only sized for people. The backlash was instant, and the spikes were torn out within days. But notice what the outrage was actually about. People weren't shocked that cities pushed the homeless around. They were shocked that, this once, someone let it be seen. Those spikes broke the first rule of coercive design, which is to never let them notice it, because the effective stuff is invisible. The ledge, with small bolts welded along the top so no one can sit or skate. The windowsill angled just enough to slide you off. The bus shelter, with a leaning bar instead of a seat, so you can rest for 90 seconds but never settle. The blue light in a public toilet, fitted so you can't find a vein. This whole quiet vocabulary even has a reassuring industry name. Defensive design, as if the building were the one under attack, and you were the threat it had to defend itself from. And some of it never even touches you. There's a device called the Mosquito that emits a high tone only young ears can hear, mounted outside shops to make teenagers uncomfortable enough to leave. Sit with what that actually is. It's a machine that sorts people by age and fires automatically, in public, with nobody's hand on the trigger. None of these objects asked your permission. None came with a sign. Each one simply decided, on someone's behalf, that you'd be better off somewhere else. None of this is new. The city has been built against people for as long as there have been cities. You've just been told it was an accident. The story everyone starts with is Robert Moses, the man who shaped much of modern New York. The legend, documented in Robert Caro's biography, The Power Broker, is that Moses had the overpasses on his Long Island parkways built unusually low, too low for public buses, so the people who rode those buses, the poor and mostly black families of the city, couldn't easily reach his gleaming new beach at Jones Beach, a racist policy hidden inside a bridge. You should know that historians argue about this one. Some say the low bridges were really about cost, or about keeping commercial traffic off a scenic road, and they point out you could still reach the beach by train. Others went and measured those overpasses and found they genuinely are strikingly low, lower than comparable parkways. So take the Moses Bridges for what they really are. Not a settled fact, but a near-perfect parable, because whether or not that one man did that one thing on purpose, the method he's accused of is real, it's documented, and it's everywhere. You see it most clearly in the highways. Across America in the middle of the last century, new expressways were routed straight through black and immigrant neighborhoods, not around them, through them, clearing what planners called blight by clearing people, and leaving a permanent wall of concrete and traffic between one side of a city and the other. That isn't a theory. The bulldozers kept records, and in Detroit, the 8-mile wall, a literal concrete barrier built in 1941 to wall off an existing black neighborhood from a planned white development so the builder could secure federal loans, showed that sometimes the exclusion didn't even bother disguising itself as infrastructure. This is the pattern a legal scholar named Sarah Schindler gave a name to: architectural exclusion. Her argument is simple and unsettling. The built world is full of features designed to keep certain people, usually the poor, usually people of color, away from certain places, and the legal system barely registers it, because a judge sees a road or a wall or a zoning code as something functional and neutral, never as the act of control it actually is. The intellectual lineage behind all of this runs deeper than the spikes and the slopes. In the 1970s, an urbanist named Oscar Newman developed the theory of defensible space, the idea that you could design crime out of a neighborhood by controlling sightlines, territory, and access. It was well-intentioned, but it handed planners a respectable academic framework for deciding which bodies belonged in which spaces. CPTED, or crime prevention through environmental design, grew from the same root, and the hostel bench is one of its distant, disowned grandchildren. Around the same time, a researcher named William H. White spent years simply watching how people used public plazas in New York, documenting what made spaces welcoming or hostile. His work directly influenced the regulations that would later govern privately owned public spaces. Good intentions and bad ones were drawing from the same well, and that last word matters: zoning. The most powerful coercive architecture isn't a spike at all. It's a rule decreeing that an entire neighborhood may contain only large, single-family houses on large, expensive lots. No apartments, no density, nothing affordable. You don't need a wall to keep people out of a place if you simply guarantee that nothing they could afford is ever allowed to be built there. It's exclusion written in the language of property, and it's perfectly legal. The objects on the street were always just the visible edge of something far larger, which brings you to the most modern version of all this, and the one most likely to catch you off guard, because the newest way to control a city isn't to make it uncomfortable, it's to make it private while letting you believe it's still yours. Look around the shiny, redeveloped heart of almost any big city now. The plaza with the fountains, the landscaped square, the riverside walk with the nice benches you can, for once, actually sit on. It feels public, it looks public, but a lot of it isn't. It's what's called privately owned public space, land that belongs to a corporation or a developer, open to you on their terms, governed by their rules instead of your rights. And on private land, your rights shrink to almost nothing. You can be told not to take photographs, not to gather, not to protest, not to hand out leaflets, not to lie down, not to film the guard who's telling you all of this. You haven't broken any law of the city, you've broken the house rules of a landlord, and they can simply ask you to leave. You thought you were a citizen standing in public. You're actually a guest, and the welcome is conditional. Now add the cameras. You know they're there, you just stopped seeing them years ago. But the modern city isn't only watched, it's designed to be watchable. Open sightlines, floodlit corners, layouts that leave you nowhere to go unobserved. This is the oldest idea in the entire book of control, the principle behind the panopticon, the prison design theorized by Jeremy Bentham and then transformed by the philosopher Michel Foucault into something far more disturbing. In his book Discipline and Punish, Foucault argued that the panopticon's real power wasn't the watching, it was that the watched began to watch themselves. You don't actually have to watch everyone all the time. You just need everyone to believe they might be watched, and they start policing themselves. Urban design and surveillance have quietly fused into a single thing. The architecture doesn't just shape where you can go, it shapes how you act once you're there, because some part of you always assumes there's a lens. Put it together and you get a city that is increasingly a privately governed, permanently monitored space you're merely permitted to pass through. Sit too long and someone appears. Film the wrong building and someone appears. Look like you have nowhere else to go, and the bench, the lighting, the camera, and the guard all quietly agree that you're a problem to be moved. You were promised a public square. What you got was someone else's lobby, and you were let in only for as long as you behaved. So come back to that bench, the one from the start, late at night, with the armrest sitting right where you didn't want it. You can answer the question now. Who is the city for? It's for the people who never need anything from it. If you can afford a car, the low bridge doesn't exist. If you have a home, the spike in the doorway is invisible. If you've got money to spend, the private plaza greets you with open arms and comfortable seats. The entire coercive layer of the city is built to be felt only by the people it targets. The tired, the poor, the young, the homeless, the unwanted, and to stay completely invisible to everyone else. That's the genius of it. The people it isn't aimed at don't even believe it exists. But you've seen it now, and that's the part they can't undo. The bench wasn't broken. The slope wasn't an accident. The square was never really yours. Every one of those surfaces was a small, silent answer to the question of who belongs. And far too often the answer was, not people like you, and not anyone with less than you. A city doesn't have to be built this way. Benches can be long enough to lie on. Public space can actually be public. Design can welcome people instead of sorting them. The hostile version isn't the natural state of the world. It's a choice, made over and over by people who decided your comfort was worth less than someone else's control. And a choice can be unmade, so here's what I'll ask of you. The next time a space quietly pushes you out, don't assume it's you. Look closer. Find the armrest, the slope, the spike, the rule. Work out who it's really for, and then tell me what you found in the comments. Because that's what this whole channel is for. Learning to read hostile architecture, coercive design, and architectural exclusion, in a world that was built to make all three invisible. If that's a world you want to see clearly, subscribe, because next time we go deeper into a single piece of it. The city has a lot more to confess.